Hello, everyone. Welcome back to International Royals TV. Thank you for clicking. Please thumbs up if you haven't already. Please subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. So today we'll be continuing on with King Charles III's life history. And if you missed any of our previous sessions, you'll be able to catch up in a playlist called King Charles III Life History, and you'll find it on the community tab and in the playlist section. Previous episodes we did was called Introduction, Early Life, Family and Education, Prince of Wales, which concentrated on his military training career, marriages to Lady Diana Spencer, then Camilla Parker Bowles, official duties, reign, health, and then charity work. So today's session is called Personal Interests, and King Charles has a lot of personal interests. So there is built environment, national environment, alternative medicine, sports, visual performing, and literacy arts. Nice. And religion and philosophy. Let me go back on that other one. Let me see if that's natural environment and alternative medicine, sports, visual performing, and literary arts. Okay, so I'll say that right now. So in today's session, it's session number 9. It's called Personal Interests. We'll focus on, for this segment, we'll concentrate on built environment, national environment, alternative medicine, and then we'll come back later on for the part 2, which will be still under the category of personal interests, and that will cover sports, visual performing and literary arts, and then religion and philosophy. But right now we are going to do session number 9. It's called Personal Interests, and I'm talking about King Charles III's life history. And source I'm reading from is Wikipedia. If you missed out on any of our previous sessions, you'll be able to catch up in the playlist section and on the community tab. Okay, so King Charles III's life history in terms of personal interests. Source I'm reading from is Wikipedia. Let's go. From young adulthood, Charles encouraged the understanding of Indigenous voices, saying they held crucial messages about preservation of the land, respecting community, and shared values, resolving conflict, and recognizing and making good on past inequities. He dovetailed? Is that dovetailed? He dovetailed this view with his efforts against climate change, as well as reconciliation between Indigenous and non-Indigenous peoples, and his charitable work in Canada. At the 2022 Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting, Charles, who was at the 2022 Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting, Charles, who was representing his mother with the history of slavery in the British Empire, for which he expressed his sorrow. Source I'm reading from is Wikipedia. Letters sent by Charles to British government ministers in 2004 and 2005 expressing his concerns over various policy issues known as the Black Spider Memos presented potential embarrassment following a challenge by The Guardian to release the letters under the Freedom of Information Act 2000. Source I'm reading from is Wikipedia. In March 2015, the Supreme Court of the United Kingdom decided that Charles's letters must be released. The Cabinet Office published the letters in May that year. The reaction was largely supportive of Charles, with little criticism of him. Oh, that's good. Source I'm reading from is Wikipedia. The press variously described the memos as underwhelming and harmless and concluded that their release had backfired on those who seek to belittle him. Good. Here. How dare they? Source I'm reading from is Wikipedia. It was revealed in the same year that Charles had access to confidential cabinet papers. In October 2020, a letter sent by Charles to the Governor-General of Australia, Sir John Kerr, after Kerr's dismissal of Prime Minister Gough Whitlam in 1975 was released as part of the collection of Palace letters regarding the Australian constitutional crisis. Source I'm reading from is Wikipedia. In the letter, Charles was supportive of Kerr's decision, writing that what Kerr did last year was right and the courageous thing to do. He's showing support. Source I'm reading from is Wikipedia. The Times reported in June 2022 that Charles had privately described the British government's Rwanda asylum plan as appalling, and he feared that it would overshadow the Commonwealth heads of government meeting in Rwanda that same month. Source I'm reading from is Wikipedia. It was later claimed that cabinet ministers had warned Charles to avoid making political comments as they feared a constitutional crisis could arise if he continued to make such statements once he became king. Source I'm reading from is Wikipedia. As we move on to built environment under the heading of personal interests of King Charles III, and this we're doing his life history. So let's continue. Built environment, source I'm reading from is Wikipedia. Charles has openly expressed his views on architecture and urban planning. He fostered the advancement of new classical architecture and asserted that he cares deeply about issues such as the environment, architecture, inner city renewal, and the quality of life. In a speech given for the 150th anniversary of the Royal Institute of British Architects in May 1984, he described a proposed extension to the National Gallery in London as a monstrous carbuncle on the face of a much-loved friend. And deplored the glass stumps and concrete towers of modern architecture. Source I'm reading from is Wikipedia. Charles called for local community involvement in architectural choices and asked, why has everything got to be so vertical, straight, unbending, only at right angles, and functional? Charles has a deep understanding of Islamic art and architecture, according to the Oxford professor Mohammed Talib, and has been involved in the construction of a building and garden at the Oxford Centre for Islamic Studies that combine Islamic and Oxford architectural styles. Source I'm reading from is Wikipedia. In Charles's 1989 book, A Vision of Britain, and in speeches and essays, he has been critical of modern architecture, arguing that the traditional designs and methods should guide contemporary ones. Arguing that traditional designs and methods should guide contemporary ones. Okay. He has continued to campaign for traditional urbanism, human scale restoration of historic buildings, and sustainable design, despite criticism in the press. Source I'm reading from is Wikipedia. Two of his charities, the Prince's Regeneration Trust and the Prince's Foundation for Building Community, which were later merged into one charity, promote his views. The village of Poundbury was built on land owned by the Duchy of Cornwall to a master plan by Leon Creer under the guidance of Charles and in line with his philosophy. Source I'm reading from is Wikipedia. In 2013, developments for the suburb of Nansildon began on the estate of the Duchy of Cornwall with Charles's endorsement. Charles helped purchase Dumfries House, its complete collection of 18th century furnishings, in 2007, taking a $20 million loan from his charitable trust to contribute towards the $45 million cost. Source I'm reading from is Wikipedia. The house and gardens remain property of the Prince's Foundation and serve as a museum and community and skills training centre. This led to the development of Knockroon, called the Scottish Poundbury. After lamenting in 1996 the unbridled destruction of many of Canada's historic urban cores, Charles offered his assistance to the Department of Canadian Heritage in creating a trust modelled on Britain's National Trust, a plan that was implemented with the passage of the federal budget in 2007. In 1999, also, in 1999, Charles agreed to the use of his title for the Prince of Wales Prize for Municipal Heritage Leadership, awarded by the National Trust for Canada to municipal governments that have committed to the conservation of historic places. Source I'm reading from is Wikipedia. Whilst visiting the US and surveying the damage caused by Hurricane Katrina, Charles received the National Building Museum's Vincent Scully Prize in 2005 for his efforts in regard to architecture. He donated US $25,000 of the prize money towards restoring storm-damaged communities. For his work as patron of new classical architecture, Charles was awarded the 2012 Dryas Architecture Prize from the University of Notre Dame. The worshipful community of carpenters installed Charles as an honorary liveryman in recognition of his interest in London's architecture. Source I'm reading from is Wikipedia. Charles has occasionally intervened in projects that employ architectural styles such as modernism and functionalism. In 2009, he wrote to the Qatari royal family, the financier of the redevelopment of the Chelsea Barracks site, labeling Lord Rogers' design for the site unsuitable. Source I'm reading from is Wikipedia. Rogers claimed that Charles had also intervened to block his designs for the Royal Opera House and Paternoster Square. Source I'm reading from is Wikipedia. If you'd like to check up on any of that, you can after this. CPC Group, the project developer, took a case against Qatari DR to the High Court. After the suit was settled, the CPC Group apologized to Charles for any offense caused, rightly so, during the course of the proceedings. Source I'm reading from is Wikipedia. That was called Built Environment. Now we are moving on to Natural Environment under the heading of Personal Interest, and this is King Charles I's life history, and source I'm reading from is Wikipedia. So let's go on to National Environment. Since the 1970s, Charles has promoted environmental awareness. At the age of 21, he delivered his first speech on environmental issues in his capacity as the chairman of the Welsh Countryside Committee. Charles was named one of the Time magazine's 100 most influential climate leaders of 2025. Wow, that's a massive achievement. An avid gardener, Charles has also emphasized the importance of talking to plants, stating that I happily talk to the plants and trees and listen to them. I think it's absolutely crucial. Nature is beautiful. Source I'm reading from is Wikipedia. His interest in gardening began in 1980 when he took over the Highgrove estate, his healing garden. Based on sacred geometry and ancient religious symbolism, went on to display at the Chelsea Flower Show in 2002. Source I'm reading from is Wikipedia. Upon moving into Highgrove House, Charles developed an interest in organic farming, which culminated in the 1990 launch of his own organic brand, Duchy Originals, which sells more than 200 different sustainably produced products. The profits, in brackets, more than 6 million by 2020. Wow, that's amazing. Are donated to the Prince's charities. Wow. Charles became involved with farming and various industries within it, regularly meeting with farmers to discuss their trade, A prominent critic of the practice, Charles has also spoken against the use of genetically modified crops, and in a letter to Tony Blair in 1998, he criticized the development of genetically modified foods. Source I'm reading from is Wikipedia. The Sustainable Markets Initiative, a project that encourages putting sustainability at the center of all activities, was launched by Charles at the World Economic Forum's annual meeting in Davos in January 2020. In May of the same year, the initiative and the World Economic Forum initiated the Great Respect Project, a 5-point plan concerned with enhancing sustainable economic growth following the global recession caused by the C-19 pandemic. Source I'm reading from is Wikipedia. The holy chrism oil used at Charles's coronation was vegan, made from oils of olive, sesame, rose, jasmine, cinnamon, neroli, and benzoin, along with amber and orange blossom. Ah, wow, sounds nice. His mother's chrism oil contained animal-based oils. Ah, wow. Source I'm reading from is Wikipedia. Charles delivered a speech at the 2021 G20 Rome Summit, describing COP26 as the last chance saloon for preventing climate change and asking for actions that would lead to a green-led sustainable economy. In his speech at the opening ceremony for COP26, he repeated his sentiments from the previous year, stating that a vast military-style campaign was needed to marshal the strength of the global private sector for tackling climate change. Source I'm reading from is Wikipedia. In 2022, the media alleged that Liz Truss had, at the time, had advised Charles against attending COP27, to which advice he agreed. Charles delivered the opening speech at COP28, saying, among others, he prayed with all my heart that COP28 will be a critical turning point towards genuine transformational action. Source I'm reading from is Wikipedia. He received a green blue Peter badge on Earth Day 2026 in recognition of his long-standing support for environmental protection and sustainability. Charles, who is patron of the Cambridge Institute for Sustainability Leadership, introduced the Climate Action Scholarships for students from small island nations in partnership with the University of Cambridge, the University of Toronto, the University of Melbourne, McMaster University, and the University of Montreal in March 2022. In 2010, he funded the Prince's Countryside Fund, in brackets, renamed the Royal Countryside Fund in 2023, close bracket, a charity that aims for a confident, robust, and sustainable agricultural and rural community. Source I've been reading from is Wikipedia. As we move on to now, alternative medicine under the headings of personal interest and its terms of King Charles I's life history. So another of his interests is alternative medicine. So let's read that. Source I'm reading from is Wikipedia. Alternative medicine. Charles has controversially championed alternative medicine, including homeopathy. He first publicly expressed his interest in the topic in December 1982 in an address to the British Medical Association. This speech was seen as combative and critical of modern medicine and was met with anger by some medical professionals. Source I'm reading from is Wikipedia. Similarly, the Prince's Foundation for Integrated Health FIH attracted opposition from the scientific and medical community over its campaign encouraging general practitioners to offer herbal and other alternative treatments to NHS patients. Source I'm reading from is Wikipedia. In April 2008, The Times published a letter from Edzard Ernest, professor of complementary medicine at the University of Exeter, which asked the FIH to record 2 guides promoting alternative medicine. That year, Ernest published a book with Simon Singh called Trick or Treatment: Alternative Medicine on Trial. Wow. And mockingly dedicated to HRH, the Prince of Wales. Wow, how dare they? How rude. Just because it didn't deal with science and he wanted to take the natural approach, they were mocking him anyway. Source I'm reading from is Wikipedia. If you'd like to go and confirm any of this and read after that, you can. The last chapter is highly critical of Charles's advocacy of complementary and alternative treatments. Charles's Duchy originals produced a variety of complementary medicinal products, including a detox tincture that Ernest denounced as financially exploiting the vulnerable and outright quackery. Wow, really? Why would they be so against natural methods of medicine? I don't understand. Source I'm reading from is Wikipedia. Charles personally wrote at least 7 letters to the Medicines and Healthcare Products Regulatory Agency shortly before it relaxed the rules governing labeling of such herbal products, a move that was widely condemned by scientists and medical bodies. It was reported in October 2009 that Charles had lobbied the Health Secretary Andy Burnham regarding greater provision of alternative treatments at the NHS. I think it's a good idea what King Charles was trying to do at the time. Source I'm reading from is Wikipedia. Following accounting irregularities, the FIH announced its closure in April 2010. The FIH was rebranded and relaunched later in 2010 as the College of Medicine, of which Charles became a patron in 2019. Source I've been reading from is Wikipedia. If you'd like to catch up on any of that, you can after this. And that brings us to the end of the 3 segments of what come under the heading of personal interest. The remaining 3, which are the personal interests of King Charles III, will be sports, visual performing and literary arts, and then religion and philosophy. We'll come back and do that part later on, otherwise it'll be too long reading. Been here for 22 minutes already. If you'd like to catch up on any of our previous sessions, you'll be able to check that out on the community tab and in the playlist section, and the playlist is called King Charles III's Life History. You'll find our previous sessions we did in there. One was called Intro, the next one was called Early Life, Family and Education, next one after that was called Prince of Wales, which concentrated on military training career, his marriages, first of all Lady Diana Spencer and then Camilla Parker Bowles, and then went on to official duties, reign, health, charity work, and then today's one was called Personal Interests, which we've had to split into 2 categories because there was 6 subheadings. So please subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Please thumbs up if you haven't already. And I shall see you back later on for the remaining part of session number 9, which is called Personal Interest. I will put